Well, good morning. Since the last time we met, the page on the calendar turned, which means we may actually be getting closer to some warmer weather. It also means that many of us now have more than a month of living under the restrictions of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it doesn't look like we'll be returning to normal very soon. While much of the news today is focusing on the health crisis, as it should, I thought this morning we could look at a happier story and have a conversation with a TV6 person from the past. It starts right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Here's your host, Don Ryan.
So, what's the happier story? Well, it's the birthday of TV6. You see, it was 64 years ago, on April 28th, that TV6 signed on the air, the first television station in Upper Michigan. I'll have more to say about that and the arrival of TV6 and what it meant for Upper Michigan 64 years ago later in today's show. You know, as I was thinking about that history, it came to mind that through the years, there were many young TV6 anchors and journalists who got their start here and moved on to new opportunities. Only a very few, however, were from this area. Today we'll talk to one of those people. Carol Anderson grew up in Ishpeming and started her television career at TV6. She's been very successful and for many years has been one of the main anchors at a station in a top 40 TV market. Now Carol Anderson Clarke, I had the chance to visit with her this week and asked her when she first developed an interest in working in television.
Actually grew up in television. My dad started in radio, as you know, because you both worked together. And then he made the transition to television. So as a kid, he would be on the road a lot. He covered the entire UP selling advertising for TV6. He would be going from the Sioux to Ironwood and all points in between. And a lot of times he would get his paperwork done after hours. So I would always ask to go with him. And we go down to TV6, and I always gravitated toward the newsroom. These were the days when you had the big, heavy, clanking teletype machines, and bells were always going off whenever there was breaking news, and reporters and photographers were running in and out. This was the time of film, so they would always be processing film and running it upstairs and making sure that it made airtime. And I was just fascinated by all the intensity and energy that was going on in the newsroom. So early on, I decided that's what I wanted to do. And I must have been 6 or 7 years old.
Really?
And then as you remember, we used to do a lot of local programming. The FCC would require it of stations to do local programming. So one of the things they did is they broadcast the employees' children's Christmas party every year, like on a Sunday afternoon or something like that. And one year I got up and recited The Night Before Christmas, and I think I was 7 or 8 when that happened. And I was hooked. I loved it. I loved hanging around the TV station, and I decided I wanted to be a TV reporter. And that's what I worked for after that. Got into one of Lane Dawson's community schools radio classes, and he offered me a part-time job. So in high school, I was a radio announcer. I was a disc jockey. Got to spin the records at WJPD.
You went to school at Northern, and at that point, it was heading for a career in broadcasting or telecasting. And you also had a chance, as part of that education, to spend some time in England, I understand.
Yeah, it was a month-long seminar in England, learning about British mass media. It was in January of 1979, I think. And I had to do some wrangling to make that happen, because that wasn't really the kind of system Northern was on. It was semesters, it wasn't quarters. So I had to talk my professors into letting me do this and kind of work out a special project. But it was a wonderful opportunity, and I learned a lot about, communication law over there. We went to Parliament one night, saw the BBC and ITV. But what was really interesting were the people I met, the fellow students. I met the great-granddaughter of Haile Selassie, the emperor of Ethiopia. And just to get that world perspective on things, to hear how people in other parts of the world viewed things, was really the great education for me in that month-long time I spent in England. And I was really glad to have that experience. It really helped.
So you got your degree at Northern, and
Mhm.
was a job waiting for you at TV6 or that at that point, or did it work out that way?
No, it didn't work out that way. I sent out all kinds of resumes and nothing happened. And I was offered a job in the audio visual department at Northern as a secretary, which makes me appreciate to this day what secretaries do because I was a terrible secretary. I think if I hadn't gotten a job in TV, I probably would have been fired from that job. But about a month in, I heard about a reporter opening at TV6, and I decided to apply for it. My dad worked there. He was working there then, and I didn't dare tell him because I knew that he would be in the general manager's office,
Right.
really trying to convince him to hire me. And I wanted to do this on my own.
Sure.
Whether or not I was accepted or not, I wanted it to be my thing. And then I would surprise my dad by telling him I got the job if I was lucky enough. And John Williams, who was the news director, called me and said, we already hired somebody else for the reporter job. And I thought, well, I guess I'm not going to work at TV6. But then he said, we want to hire you as the anchor, which was a surprise. So I went to work at TV6 as an anchor, and I was so lucky to have still in my mind, some of the greatest folks in the business to help me along. Frida Wara was a reporter then. Lorraine Zeno was a reporter. Ed Carney was the assistant news director, a really creative guy, would really come up with some great ways to get stories. I remember there was a riot at the Marquette prison. And, the way the prison is set into a bowl, it's really hard to get any video of what's going on in there unless somebody actually lets you in. But Ed remembered that as a kid, he would climb some trees there behind the prison. And he remembered one really tall maple tree. And Ed climbed the tree with a camera and got some of the only video there was of the riot at the time. But that's kind of the creative guy that Ed was. And I was lucky enough to work with these people and really learn a lot at TV6.
We'll return to our conversation with Carol Anderson Clarke after we take this 2-minute break. Continuing our conversation with Ishpeming native Carol Anderson Clarke, who started her very successful television career here at TV6. Like all young reporters, the time comes when you want to move on. And I asked her where that first move took her.
I was lucky enough to be offered a job at WOKR in Rochester, New York, which is a sister station, or at least was at the time, for TV6. So I packed up and moved out to New York State, and I was there for 2.5 years. And what caused me to leave finally was the weather again. I had been out reporting on a very cold day. And you have to understand, in Rochester, even more so than in the UP, people dress head to toe for the cold. I was wearing a big hat. I was wearing a down coat. I had thin-solate boots, thin-solate gloves, a scarf. And I was out in this used car parking lot doing a business story. And I kept trying to do the stand-up. That's when you see the person on camera. But it was so cold, my cheeks were just frozen. So I sounded like this when I talked. And I had to keep doing it over and over again. Well, I get back in the car and I realized that I had bundled up everything except I was wearing metal earrings and my earlobes were exposed. And I realized to my horror that I could not feel my earlobes. So I'm thinking, oh, great. I've got frostbite. This will end my career because my earlobes will have to be amputated. And who's going to hire an anchor who doesn't have any earlobes, right? So I go to the doctor. He says, it's going to be about 3 days before we know whether or not, you're going to have a serious problem. But eventually feeling came back and I managed to keep my earlobes. And I called my agent, which sounds like a big deal, but it's just somebody who helps you find a job. And I said, I don't care where you get me a job, as long as it's below the Mason-Dixon line. So he called back and he said, how about Greenville? And I said, what state is it in? Because I think there's a Greenville in just about every state. And he said, South Carolina. So I flew out of Rochester at the beginning of a blizzard. I think they closed the airport after the plane left. Flew down to South Carolina, got off the plane. It was 75 degrees. the azaleas were in bloom, the tulips were in bloom. And I said, I don't care what the TV station looks like. This looks like home to me. And that was 35 years ago, the end of April. So I've been here for 35 years. And this is home.
And that is unusual. You know, oftentimes people have to make many moves before they kind of reach that place where they want to stay. But for you, it was just the, I guess, third stop.
Well, I think what it is too is you're looking for quality of life. Rochester wasn't a really great experience for me, but when I got here, it just felt like the right place to be. And I had an opportunity to go to Cincinnati at one point, but I just kept thinking, this place has everything I need. This is the place where I can tell stories, which at the end of the day is what a reporter does. And we've had some amazing stories over the years, and I've just been really glad and blessed to be able to do what I love here.
For the benefit of our audience, again, understanding television stations are kind of measured by market size, which is based on population, as you know. And TV6, for example, is in the 180th market, and I believe Greenville is 38. So, you know, you're kind of in the big time, and it's obviously a major television operation, many opportunities.
Well, we cover a big geographic area, and in many respects, it's like the UP in that way. You know, TV6 does cover a big geographic area. We cover Western North Carolina, the upstate of South Carolina, and northeastern Georgia. So the story opportunities are many. But yeah, it's been a good move.
And you've already done well. You've won a Peabody Award. You've won some Emmys. You won an award for a series on the textile industry in Taiwan and Hong Kong, which must have been very interesting. And you also received South Carolina Broadcaster Association Award, which acknowledges lifetime achievement. So, you know, you've done a good job down there.
Well, Don, I always say if you get a Lifetime Achievement Award, it just kind of means you're old. But it's been a blessing to be able to do those stories and to be recognized for them. I won't kid you about that. It's been a lot of fun. And, you know, doing the textile reporting that I did when I first came here, Greenville is no longer a textile center in the US, but at the time it was. I used a lot of the training I got in Marquette. I did a lot of business reporting then. I reported on the steel industry, did a series on reclaiming the tailings ponds from iron mining. So a lot of that training really came in handy when I moved here and started as a business reporter working on textiles.
Okay. Let's talk about your personal life. I understand you've raised a couple of kids since you left here.
Yeah, I don't know where the time went. They were 4 years old a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden my daughter is 30 and my son's 27, and they're out on their own. But yeah, a couple of kids, and I have remarried, and my husband is a composer, and this time of sort of self-quarantining has been fruitful for him. He's a composer, and he's written a whole new series of pieces that have been published, were accepted for publication a couple of days ago. So yeah, we are trying to weather this time as best we can, I think.
And I know one of your outside interests or personal interest is singing, and apparently still very involved in that area.
Yeah, I sing in a couple of choirs, and frankly, we've been doing online services at the church that I attend. And we've gone from a choir of about 35 people to about 8 socially distanced in the choir loft. The priest says the mass, and there are several sisters who are, you know, socially distanced downstairs. But we've been able to provide music for an online service. And it's been gratifying to see people, you know, weigh in where they are. We've had people watch from as far away as Australia and Ontario. People looking for that connection, people looking to still participate in a church service. So that's been really gratifying as well to do that.
You know, here at TV6, we have less than half of our people working in the building. Most are working from home.
Yeah.
How has this affected your work in Greenville?
Well, you're seeing me in my home studio a couple of times a week. I anchor from home at 6 and 11, and I do my health reporting at 4. And my co-anchor is still going into the building, but he is socially distanced from everybody else. And when I'm in the building to anchor, I have one particular part of the set that I'm on, and my co-anchor is clear across the studio at his spot in the studio. Our reporters, they carry long sticks that they put the microphone at the end of. They do a lot of what we're doing right now, which is Zoom or Skype in terms of trying to get interviews. I mean, as you know, Don, because you're doing the same thing, it's a radical change in how we operate. But I'm really gratified to see that the technology is really keeping up and helping us to keep in touch.
Yeah, it's been kind of amazing for me too. You know, you think when you've been around as long as I have that you've done everything, but it turns out you haven't. And who knows what's coming next. So it's been great talking with you.
Great to see you too.
Thanks to Carol for taking the time to be part of today's show. Some pleasant memories. I'll be back in just 2 minutes. Today, since we're talking about TV6's 64th birthday, I thought we could make a trip to the archives and share some memories from the past. Those memories include the host of the first TV6 kids show, Roy Peterson, aka Darby 06, and to start off, the leader of a local musical group whose band had a show in the earliest days of TV6. Ray Adamini was here several times and was always a fun guest. And on this occasion, we talked about his band's weekly show when TV6 first went on the air.
We were on there for 3 or 4 years, right? Okay. From, I think we started in May or so, somewhere May or the end of May of '56.
So within a month or two of the station going on the air, you were on the air.
And it was a lot of fun.
And this was a once a week, it was a half-hour show?
Once a week, half-hour show.
It was about 7 o'clock in the evening, as I recall.
Somewhere around there.
I was just a kid back then.
I know you asked me what night, I don't remember, you know.
Yeah. What typically would you do during the show?
Well, we did all the songs of the day. You know, Lawrence Welk was very popular at that time, and Tennessee Ernie Ford and Pat Boone and Dinah Shore, they all had shows, and whatever popular songs they were, we'd simply play the song.
Just because you think you're so pretty, well, buddy, just because you think you're so hot, 2, 3, 4, just because you think you got something that nobody else has. Oh, you sweet, you bunch of me.
You know, people realize, but this was really something because it was live TV.
Yeah, that's right.
We didn't have videotape back in those days.
If you made a clunker, it went over the air.
Did you have any disasters that you can remember?
Not really, not really.
Now, we have a picture, if we can call that up on the screen right now. People can see, here it is, it's one of your Darby 06 pictures. I think that's Barney Bear on your shoulder. But that was the black vest, the black derby hat, and the 6 on the front. That was Darby 06, and boy, I'll tell you, other than the glasses, you look like the same guy. Much of television programming really grew out of radio programming. Every radio station had a kids show. About that time, every television station had a kids show, and then of course your show was that example.
Well, it was one of those deals where the story was that we didn't have a children's program, evidently, if that was the thing to do at the time. The station management felt that it was necessary. Station manager came down to the floor here, to the studio floor where I was running camera, and said, we're going to have a children's program. We'd like you to do it. And that was on a Thursday. And I said, well, I've never done anything like that before. And no, this is going to work out pretty well. And I said, well, when does this start? Monday. Monday, and that was it. We had some cartoons to fill some time. And then we generated certain features. I'm putting features in quotes, believe me. But things like a birthday book where kids would hear their name on television.
Fun memories from two people who are part of TV6 history. I'll be back to share some thoughts about that history in just 2 minutes. Well, putting aside the situation we find ourselves in today because of the COVID-19 pandemic, let's see if we can imagine what life might have been like for you and me if we were living in the early 1950s. Coming home from work, you might take time to read the newspaper, maybe catch part of the Tigers baseball game on the radio. After dinner, maybe it's a trip to the bowling alley, or perhaps it's a stay-at-home night, time to read a book, or the family could meet at the dining room table for a game of Yahtzee or Candyland. And it's very likely before the evening is done, the family will gather in the living room and get together around the radio to listen to Fibber McGee and Molly, Jack Benny, The Great Gildersleeve, or perhaps Mr. Keene, Tracer of Lost Persons. So let me ask you a question. What's missing? What was missing from that mix of activities? You've probably guessed. The answer is television. That's why I get so enthusiastic when I say it was a big day when TV6 first went on the air on April 28, 1956. This was not just a new business opening in our community. It was the arrival of an exciting new form of entertainment that would captivate us for years into the future. TV6 and TV was brand new. Television was here for the very first time. It was all thanks to Marquette businessman Frank Russell, who owned 3 Upper Michigan newspapers and several radio stations. Opening the region's first television station was a big investment, and success wasn't guaranteed. The television business is supported by selling advertising to other businesses who have products or services to sell, and they want to reach a large audience with their story. The problem is, in the early days of TV6, there really wasn't a large audience because most people still did not own a TV set. It would take time for that audience to build. Fortunately, in our home, we had a 17-inch black and white set ready to watch everything the station had to offer when it went on the air. I was a sophomore in high school when TV6 made its first telecast, and I would wind up working here about 9 years later. Back then, the station went on the air at about 4 in the afternoon and signed off around midnight. And what were people watching? Well, at that time, TV6 was a CBS affiliate, and the most popular shows in the country were on that network. People gathered around their TV set each night to watch shows like I Love Lucy, Ed Sullivan, Alfred Hitchcock, and Gunsmoke. Ironically, reruns of many of those shows are still available today on some cable networks. And they were watching something else. From the first day TV6 went on the air, there was a local news program, and that tradition has carried on ever since. It's part of our heritage. It's part of who we are. We're not just another TV station. We are part of Upper Michigan, and we have been since we brought television to this area 64 years ago. Happy birthday, TV6. I'll be back in a minute. It's time to wrap it up for another week. I hope you enjoyed our look back to the past this morning. Thanks to Carol Anderson Clarke for joining us, and thank you for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you again next Sunday morning.